or Izzi. In Italian, they would call it
Izzi is easy both ways. It's easy both ways.
Izzi. And he finds it relatively easy to write one book after another. I can't keep up with him, but the last one had a mayor of Chicago who had some of the characteristics of the current mayor of Chicago. And she ended up murdered.
I killed her off in the first chapter.
Killed her off in the first. So be careful around him. He might be writing something about you too. So Edward Izzi.
Easy Edward, Z, I-Z-Z-I, backwards, forwards, same as you. You can't misspell it. First of all, it's an honor to be here to discuss my short literary career. And I thought before getting into some of that, we could discuss what we've heard so far. Professor Dominic Candelaro keeps reminding us, and we have to remind ourselves, and how important it is that we attempt to preserve our Italian heritage through the written word. And with the new generations coming up behind us, that's going to be a daunting task. Our children, our grandchildren coming up are not as fluent with our Italian heritage as we are. And so we need to keep that going forward and recorded so that it's never forgotten. Dr. Carlo Simonini talked about Italian Americana and representing the Italian American experience. And being that she's the professor of Italian studies at Loyola, she's very knowledgeable about this, and she's currently writing a book right now in regards to that. And it's she's become a very prominent member of our Italian community, and we're really grateful to have her here. Terry Quilco discussed how the 1909 Cherry Coal Mine disaster changed his life and his literary career, and discussed some of the excerpts from his book and his experiences. And of course, Karen Tintori, who discussed as a writer what she had researched as far as the Cherry Mine disaster and her personal history and incident. Professor Morocco, this read excerpts from her novel about Giuseppe and Lucia, Midnight Mass, and the girl who wanted to be an astronaut. Professor Fred Gardafi discussed, I'm sorry, I misspoke there. Discussed the creativity of Italian-American writers and supporting one another. And Joy Iannino, who's written 11 books, with his believable dialogue and fiction, his experiences as a prolific writer, and discussed his prior books, Lost and Found, Soaring, and 630. And he talked about writing with his five senses, and about how writing has become one of his addictions. We enjoyed the Hamlet Redux, which we thoroughly enjoyed by Terry. Thank you very much for presenting that. It was quite a production, and it was very satirical, but we all enjoyed it. So thank you, Terry. Tony Romano, we all enjoyed his presentation about growing up in Chicago and learning about what it was like to grow up in Chicago neighborhoods. And I haven't heard the word "wayo" in so long. Finally, I remember, but thanks for reminding us of that. And fellow fiction author, Arthur Cola, about his Vicenza murder series. Very interesting and very informative, and it's informative, but yet it's very inspiring when you find a fiction author who takes a piece of history and fictionalizes it. I did that with my first book of Bread and Wine, where I took the rumor that was going around Rome about Pope John Paul I being murdered. And I took that and I fictionalized that, and Arthur Cole, I seem to have that talent to do that as well. So I'm looking forward to reading his stuff. And of course, Peter Pero, who discussed this new book about Chicago, as a workshop to the world and how thousands of companies have been launched from our great city. So getting on to me, I'm a thriller fiction author, which means I'm a little off center. And I'm not sure if there's really anything that I could present that would follow up all these great authors here in this room and all this wonderful literature that they've presented to all of us. But in thinking about it, I think there's one word, one characteristic that we all have that pushes us to expressing our stories, fiction or nonfiction, and stringing some words into a series of paragraphs to make it sense. I think that one common trait that we all have, that one descriptive word that summarizes what pushes us as writers, and I think it would be resolve. It takes a tremendous amount of resolve and determination to get us to the point of imagining, writing, processing, and eventually publishing a book or a novel. It's our determination, our resolve that helps us create our storylines. It's our determination, our resolve that helps us mold our ideas, our thoughts, and putting them together and stringing them into paragraphs that make up literary works of fiction or nonfiction. It is our determination, our resolve that helps us move forward in creating our thoughts and words to make some sort of literary sense, so to speak. I guess I'm here to suggest whatever help I can give to any of you about writing your next novel. And being that I've written 8 of them so far, I think maybe I could give you a little bit of input on that. I'm not saying that I'm any good at it, and I'm not saying that my novels are any work of literary genius or any good by any means. But by following that one word, resolve, I think I can safely say that I've learned to be consistent in pushing out my thoughts and my storylines into 300 or more pages of self-expression. Like I said, I'm a thriller fiction author, and that basically means that I'm not always thinking like I should be thinking, like most of us should be. There's something always a little off center about the way I'm looking at things versus another author. I'm thinking of I'm thinking more of what, where, and how I can come up with different creative storylines. When people ask me where I come up with my material, I usually tell them that I'm under medication. I usually tell them I have a psychological imbalance, and that's pretty much where I come with my stories. It also helps if you're an insomniac. If I've got a good night's sleep, I'd have a difficult time sitting down and writing again. But for those of us here who are normal, and I'm assuming all of you are,
Don't.
It takes a tremendous amount of resolve and determination to express yourself in some creative storyline that will get you to the point to where you've all gotten today. So let's talk about, now that you've written your first or second or even third book, where to go with it. For me, and I know this is crazy, I start out with a title. You say, how can you start a book with a title? Well, that's something that's worked well for me. My novels like A Rose from the Executioner, Quando Dormo, When a Rook Takes the Queen, They Only Wear Black Hats. These are all novels that started with just the title and no storyline. And then I come up with a protagonist in the storyline that will match the title of my story. That story usually consists of a main character, such as a reporter, a lawyer, a detective, a doctor, or in my upcoming novel, Parish Priest, all struggling with reality. All of them are main characters who are terribly imperfect. They have a countless number of bad habits, who may be characters that we may learn to love as we get to know them, or just characters whom we love to hate. These protagonists are those that we use to express ourselves in the first person throughout many of my stories. And they might be chain smokers, compulsive gamblers, alcoholics, womanizers, lonely, scored divorcees, or just persons who are struggling with their daily lives, every hour of every day, day in and day out. The rest of my narrative is usually told in the third person, combining both approaches while drawing in the reader. My protagonists are just people like us who are greatly flawed, who struggle to get their jobs done. They fight their rat race every day just to pay their bills, put food on their tables, and these are characters who are also imperfect, who never seem to catch a break no matter how hard they try to succeed. For me, my protagonists are one step away from becoming certified losers before getting and gathering clues, tracking down the murderer, or solving the case and eventually getting the girl. And then, of course, comes the conflict. What problems are the main protagonists in your story encountering? Are they characters who are contributing to this conflict? Who is the secondary character who's contributing to the controversy, and how does the protagonist in your story struggle to solve these current issues? There almost always has to be a good guy and a bad guy. I know it sounds ridiculously basic, but it helps in creating a storyline and assisting you in getting your message across to the reader. For me, I write in fragments. I may start one chapter in one part of the storyline, for example, and call that chapter 1. Then I may start another chapter in a different part of the plot line and call that chapter 7, and so on. I try to write each chapter as an integral part of my storyline. Every time I get inspired, it might be the development of a new character, a new anti-hero, or a new femme fatale, I will write that chapter out of sequence. And after writing all these fragmented chapters, I'll put them all together and create an interesting storyline. So how does a writer put these words together? I compare writing to being a painter. A painter uses different colors, different expressions, and how he is painting that picture with different strokes, using bright, dark, illuminated colors to complete his painting. A writer tends to do the same thing. A writer uses his or her emotions, with their 5 senses, if you will, to express the character's feelings and emotions and what that character is going through in that story. The sense of taste, the sense of sight, the sense of hearing, of touching, of smelling, all come into play when describing and setting up each chapter of your story. What is that character doing? What is that character feeling? What does he see? What kind of day was it at that point of the story? What was the weather like? Is the main character angry? Is he apprehensive? Is he scared? Does the character feel at the moment in time? And what is he possibly feeling? By using these 5 senses thoroughly, you tend to hook the reader into your story. The reader is now a part of your plot, part of your storyline, and now he's part of your conflict. You want to write in such a way to keep your reader interested. You don't want to lose the reader and give up on your story. You want that reader to be a part of your moving storyline. And then after writing your story, after designing the cover, after putting together all your sporadic chapters and putting them in some sort of a sequential order, comes the most difficult task of editing. We are all guilty of editing errors in our books, and for me, I'm no different. And it doesn't matter how many professional editors I hire to edit my transcripts, they always tend to sort of creep into my storylines in one way or the other. And my only advice to anyone who's editing, whether they're editing their own books or whether they have someone editing for them, is to read their stories out loud over and over and over again. I can't reiterate enough how important editing is when you're writing a story. Of course, this is just my approach to writing. It's by no means a step-by-step approach when you're writing your next book or your novel. But it's a unique method that I've discovered that helps me in writing and helps me putting together a new book. But as you're writing your new book, I'd like to leave you with one final thought. We're not writing to make the New York Times bestseller list, even though I'm sure it would be a wonderful accomplishment for all of us. We don't do this for the money, and we certainly don't do this for fame or fortune. We're not writing to impress anyone or to prove anyone to anything as far as what our capabilities of writing are concerned. But we do write for ourselves. Our words come from deep within our souls. Our storylines, our next new book or our novel will only temporarily satisfy that craving that we have to express ourselves. And after we publish that second or third book, after the personal highs and reviews are written about our new literary showpiece in Time, we will come back, sit in front of our laptops, and write our next new novel. And hopefully, we can start to write and begin that whole wonderful process all over again, and again, and again, and again. Thank you.
You all for coming here today.